we can take a look at how to do this without a calculator by just saying, hey, this means the square root's going to be with the top and the bottom. Okay. And this is a cool little trick that we can do here, because when I go to check this out, the square root of 49 equals 7. So I get 7 over the square root of 9 is 3. So I see that this is 7/3. So I can go, oops, the squared went away. Sorry about that. There's no squared there. X equals 7/3, plus or minus. So again, 2 answers. Okay, so no need for decimals. In case this one, decimals would be really bad, right? Because since it's divided by 3, this is what's called an irrational decimal, because it goes on forever. It repeats forever. So we'd want to keep this as a fraction. And remember, with Desmos and this yellow calculator, so I just want to show you guys, if you get 7 divided by 3 and it gets a decimal like this, right? There's always going to be, if a physical calculator, you can hit the double arrow button and that will give you a ratio, or Desmos will have a little button that next to the answer that will switch it to a fraction. Okay, so that way we don't have to worry about rounding, because if you round this, you can't round it and not have the right answer because it's irrational. All right, guys, so those were our 2 warm-up problems. A little bit more complicated than last time because we had fractional answers. Does anybody have questions about that? We're going to be moving on today, so if you guys have questions, now's the time to ask them, because we're going to be adding one more little step. Okay. Well, no one no one's responding to me. So are we doing okay, guys? I got a full class today and no one's telling me if they have questions or not. Okay. All right. Hey, and just a reminder, make sure you guys are getting your work done. I know that a couple of you I saw just turned in assignments, so I'm going to be updating the grade book today. So make sure, if you guys need help with assignments, that you guys are either coming to my office hours. My office hours are from 8:30 to 10 in the morning. So I really encourage you guys to come in to my office hours, get help. I would love to help, okay? All right, let's take a look. So we are doing, again, if you're following along in the book or just keeping organized like you should, so we're doing 9.3 day 2, and we're still going to be solving with square roots. But this time, we're going to have a little bit more difficult problem. Okay? So we're going to have something inside our function. So right now, everything has been outside. And when I mean outside the function, right, the 4 is outside of the x squared, right? It's 4 times x squared. So we could even put parentheses if we wanted to and see how that is on the outside, right? But we don't write the parentheses because we're lazy, right? That's why mathematicians don't do that. So it's 9 times x squared, right? So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at what happens when stuff is inside those parentheses. So we're just going to jump right into this and do an example together. So we're going to solve, we're going to have the quantity of x minus 1 squared equals 25. Okay, so notice now how with the parentheses, right, this is inside the square. Okay, so it's inside, and that's what we're going to take a look at today. How do we solve things that are inside a square? And the key is you deal with it at the end. Okay, so the first step, we can write this down in blue. So first, get Ooh, whoa! I wrote gext. I don't think that's a word. I think that's a get and next together. So we're going to get the squared term by itself. Now, in this case, it's already by itself, right? We have something squared. So we've already done that. So the second part is we're going to square root both sides. Okay. So just like we did before, we're going to square root both sides. So what this means is I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to square root both sides. Okay. So when I square root both sides, the square and the square root are going to go away, and I'm going to be left with everything down below. So I'm going to have x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 25. So I'm going to grab my calculator, and I'm going to say, oh, okay, what's the square root of 25? So I have the square root of 25 equals 5. So I'm going to have x minus 1 equals plus or minus 5. Okay, so this is where the new content comes in, right? So we know about getting the square by itself. We know how to take the square root of both sides. So the new step comes in step 3. Okay, so set up two equations. So we're going to set up two equations and solve both. Okay, so this is the new stuff. So step 3 is the new stuff. Now notice how it says plus or minus. So really there's two equations here. It's x minus 1 equals positive 5 or x minus 1 equals negative 5. So we're going to write this as two separate equations. X minus 1 equals positive 5 and x minus 1 equals negative 5. Notice how the only difference, right, is the plus or minus. Right, we're doing the plus and minus. Okay, so we're going to solve for when it's positive, and we're going to solve for when it's negative. So all we're going to do is we're going to solve these. So it's x minus 1 on both of these. So I'm going to add 1 to get rid of the minus 1. And I get x equals 5 plus 1 is 6. So there's one of my answers. And then the other one, I'm going to add 1 to both sides. But here we have a negative. So I owe, right? Like let's say I have a mortgage on my home and I owe $5 on it. Gosh, that would be nice. And then I pay off $1 of it. So how much do I owe left? I'm still going to owe $4. Okay, so those are my two solutions. So the last thing here, so normally before, we didn't have to do this because it was just x, right? So those were our two solutions, x equals positive or negative 5. But now that we have stuff inside, it's not going to be just this number. It's going to be, right, in this case, plus or minus 1 from 5. Okay. Kind of cool? Maybe. Okay. Now, sometimes you can see this if you guys go on like the internet or you're reading in a book. Sometimes it will write the answers as plus or minus 5 plus 1. Okay, because this is the same thing, right? So 1 plus positive 5 is 6. 1 plus a negative 5 is negative 4. But the way that we're going to write our answers is just as the whole number. Okay, but I just want you guys to be aware that sometimes people write their answers like this. You might see this too when like people are doing statistics. They might say, well, my answer is 1, but it's plus or minus 5 from that. Or 1 is my average, but it's plus or minus 5. So you see that a lot of people use that in statistics. Be like, well, I usually get 27 customers plus or minus 5 a day. Right? And so then if you had a restaurant, that's how much food you'd want to prep, right? Because you don't want to run out of food, and you don't want to make too much food, right? So, because that would also be a waste. All right, cool. So does anybody have questions about this? The step, right? This is the new step. So once we get to the plus or minus, right, we're going to set up two equations. So I figure we'll take some time practicing this, and then we'll see where you guys are there. That was stuff from my office hours this morning. All right, let's take a look. So let's do a couple more. Okay, so let's do this one. So try on your own. So let's try x minus 3 quantity squared equals 16. Okay. And here, I'm going to give you guys, I think, 2 minutes will be more than enough. So we're going to solve for this. And remember, guys, mistakes are going to happen, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for mistakes, right? We want mistakes to happen so we can identify them and figure out why they happened so that we can make sure they don't happen again. All right, let's take a look at this, guys. Was that enough time? Does anybody need more time? Sometimes I can be wrong with my time, you know? All right, not getting any feedback, so we're just going to go ahead and take a look at this. So the first thing I'm going to look at is the squared term by itself? Because in a second here, I'm going to start doing some problems that the squared term isn't by itself. So we got to be careful about that. So right here, I have the squared terms by itself. So I'm just going to go ahead. I want to get rid of the square. Okay, so the square and the square root go away. So I'm left with x minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 16. So let's figure out what the square root of 16 is. So the square root of 16 is 4. So I'm going to have x minus 3 equals plus or minus 4. Okay. So remember, we just have to remember plus or minus means two answers. So if we have two answers, that means we're going to have two equations. So I'm going to have x minus 3 equals positive 4 and x minus 3 equals negative 4. So the left side, right, is always going to stay the same. It's just the right side that's going from positive to negative. So then we're going to, right, so you got your x minus 3 equals 4 and your x minus 3 equals negative 4. Now we're going to want to solve both of these for our two answers. So in this case, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So I get x equals 3 plus 4 is 7. And then I'm going to add 3 to both sides here. Be careful of that negative, right? And that's going to be negative 1. Okay. Like that. How did you guys do? Are we getting stuck anywhere? Where are we getting stuck? Does anybody have questions or comments or points of confusion? Well, yeah, we're gonna practice more. We're gonna be practicing more for sure. I just want to see if people are stuck or they're getting tripped up on something or they have a question on how I did it. Okay. So I'm not hearing anything, so we're just gonna keep practicing and keep working on these. Okay. So let's try another one. Let's try this one. So the quantity of x plus 7 quantity squared minus 2 equals negative 2. So let's try this one. Remember, you have to get the squared term by itself first. So if there's extra terms, we got to move those. So make sure, guys, if, again, notice right here, right? So the x squared term isn't by itself. You got to get it by itself first. And let me know if you guys have questions. Okay, let's take a look at this, guys. Let's see what happens. So if I underline this, right, this is my squared term, right? So this is my squared term. And it's not by itself. So there's a minus 2 here. So I'm going to go and I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So negative 2 plus 2 is 0. And negative plus 2 is 0. So I get, on this side, the quantity of x plus 7 squared equals 0. Okay. And then now that I have this isolated, right? So that was one step that we didn't have in the previous problems. Then I'm going to go and I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Right? So the square and the square root go away. So I get x plus 7, and then I'm going to have plus or minus the square root of 0. Now, if you guys forgot, remember you can always use a calculator, but the square root of 0 is 0. And there is no such thing as plus or minus 0. It's just 0, right? Remember, 0 is a special number. So there is no such thing as a positive or a negative 0. 0 has no positive or a negative, okay, unless we're talking about calculus and having things approach things, but we're not close to there, okay? So it's just x plus 7 equals 0. So if you put plus or minus on this, be careful, it's just 0. So if I minus from both sides, okay, then I just get x equals negative 7. So there is just one solution. And it's just like, right? So before, if we had, right, x squared equaled 0, then it's just one solution as well. So whenever we have an x squared equal as 0, then we know we're only going to have one solution. So that's something that we learned last time. That's coming back around this time as well. So does anybody have questions about this? Right? So we ended up getting plus or minus 0. And 0 is a special number, so there is no plus or minus 0. So it's just 0. And so there's only one equation, right? So this is an example of one solution. Right? One solution only there. So again, I'm going to pause here. Does anybody have any questions or something that like you saw that you were like, what? Okay. If you guys are making mistakes and you're just not sharing them, make sure you're trying to figure out where you're making the mistake. Or if you're getting stuck and like, I can't make it any further, figure out where that's happening and be like, okay, how am I going to overcome getting stuck here, right? What do I need to do to get past that? All right. No one's saying anything, so I'm gonna go ahead and keep going with some more practice problems. So we'll keep going, guys. So let's try another one. So this one is gonna be 4 times the quantity of x minus 3 quantity squared equals 9. Okay. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit more time with this. I'm going to give you 2 minutes and 30 seconds just because, hint, 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 there's a fraction in here and fractions are totally okay. So there's a fraction in this one. Fractions are totally okay. We did that with 2 problems in the warm-up. So let's give it a shot now here as well. All right, let's take a look, guys, at how we are doing this. So, again, if you guys have questions, stop me at any time and ask. So the first thing I'm going to notice is that my squared term, and you guys are awfully quiet today. The squared term here is not isolated, right? So it's 4 times the squared term. So the first thing we need to do is we need to divide by 4 on both sides, okay? Because we got to get the squared term by itself. So I'm going to have the quantity of x minus 3 squared equals 9 divided by 4. And again, fractions are our friends. Fractions are the way to go, okay? So we don't want to write this as a decimal. We want to just leave it as 9/4. Okay? It's not a whole number, so we leave it as a fraction because that's what fractions are all about. It's division that we don't want to do. Okay? So I have the square root, so I'm going to square root both sides. So the square and the square root go away. So I'm left with x minus 3 equals plus or minus square root of 9/4. Now remember, this is what we talked about at the beginning. Square root of 9/4 is the same as square root of 9 over the square root of 4. Okay? So, what number times itself gives us 9? That's 3. And what number times itself gives us 4? That's 2. And you can just double check, right? 3 times 3 is 9, and 2 times 2 is 4. So we can rewrite this as x minus 3 equals plus or minus 3/2. And again, the calculator can do this for you if you're using Desmos. Okay. All right. Does anybody have questions so far? I thought for sure you guys would have questions about this, but you guys are doing okay? You guys are doing it with the calculator maybe? Sometimes I feel like a lot of us aren't actually paying attention. Worries me a little bit about you guys. All right, so here I'm going to have 2 equations then. I'm going to have x minus 3 equals positive 3/2. Oops. And we're going to have x minus 3 equals negative 3/2. Okay. So to solve these again, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Now you can do this with a calculator or without a calculator. I know a lot of you guys are going to choose a calculator, but just remember to add these together, 3/2. You can just make this 3 into halves. So that would be 6/2. Because 2 goes into 6 3 times. So 3 plus 6 is 9, so it would be 9/2. Okay. Again, if you're using Desmos or a yellow calculator, it's really easy to go from a decimal to a fraction. Okay, but this right here is the same thing as adding 3. Okay. And then here on this side, I'm going to add 3 to both sides. So again, you don't have to use a calculator, but I know a lot of you guys are using calculators. So I have negative 3/2, but then 3, remember, can be written as 6/2, right? This is the same as 3. So this is just negative 3 plus 6, which is 3/2. So those are my 2 answers, 9/2 and 3/2. Okay. So did that throw people off again? Are we doing okay with the fractions? I was kind of thinking people would be thrown off by the fractions, but maybe you guys are just using calculators and you're feeling okay. I feel like this is one of these days where I could put up a calculus problem and yeah, it is a little bit hard. It is. Thank you guys for saying that. It is a bit hard, right? And we're learning new stuff, and so it is going to be difficult, right? So the idea, though, is we're going to keep doing it. Now, remember, if you're using Desmos or a physical calculator, you can always just go 3, like, so in this case, I have positive 3/2 and then plus 3, right? So I get 9/2. Okay? So again, the calculator, if you're using a calculator, it will help you out quite a bit. And hey guys, if you yeah, right? Yeah, and that's the thing about math. It's not necessarily that we're doing super crazy hard things. It's just that when you have all these small steps, it's harder because there's so many steps to keep track of. And so we just got to practice until we're not bothered by that anymore. So I really appreciate that observation. So -3 over 2, and then +3, and then I get 3/2. So again, guys, the calculator will do a lot of the hard work for you. We just have to remember all the steps. Okay. The same thing for if I do the square root of, and then I put a fraction in here, 9/4. It should tell me, right, that I get 3/2, right? So the calculator will even do what I did by hand. I just wanted to show you what your calculator is doing so that way you guys understand, because you don't need a calculator to do all of this. In fact, the calculator might slow you down quite a bit. Okay. All right, so we're gonna have to keep practicing, right? We're gonna have to keep practicing. So let's keep on it, right? And that's what we're gonna keep doing. We're just gonna keep practicing. Okay, let's try this next one. So the quantity of 2x plus 1 squared equals 36. And we will do, let's do 2 minutes and 30 seconds on this. All right, guys, let's take a look at what we got here. So the first thing I'm going to take a look at here is I'm going to take a look at, hey, is my squared term by itself? And it looks like it is, right? Everything else is inside. So if everything else is inside, then I got it. I got the squared by itself. So I'm going to go ahead and square root both sides. And the square and the square root are going to cancel out. So I'm going to get, oops, don't need the parentheses anymore. 2x plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 36. So I'm going to grab my calculator really quick and be like, hey, if I forgot what times itself equals 36, and I might be, 6 times 6 is 36. So I get 2x plus 1 equals plus or minus 6. Okay. So I get 2x plus 1 equals plus or minus 6, because that's what the square root of 36 is. 6 times 6 is 36. So now I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to have two equations. I'm going to have, hey, 2x plus 1 can equal a positive 6, and 2x plus 1 can equal a negative 6. So in solving this, I'm going to, again, just like we would with a regular problem, do addition subtraction first. So I'm going to get rid of that plus 1. So I get 2x equals positive 5. Ooh, can I fix that? There we go. 6 minus 1 is positive 5. And then I divide by 2. So I get x equals 5 halves. Again, we just leave it as a fraction because it's just division we don't want to do. Okay, so that's all we're doing there, right? We subtracted 1 from both sides, and then we divided by 2. Then for this next one, we're going to kind of repeat the process, but the number on the right is going to be negative. So I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides. Here, though, since I'm already negative, I'm going to get more negative. So I'm going to get negative 7. I divide by 2. And I get x equals negative 7 divided by 2. Okay, so I have two fractional answers, again, which is totally okay. All right, well, let's keep going with this, guys. We're going to keep practicing. Does anybody have questions about this? Are we getting stuck anywhere, or did I do something that was confusing? Right, when we see the plus or minus, that means we're going to have two equations, right? That's what that means. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at a couple more. We have the time for it, so I want to make sure you guys leave today with a little bit of confidence that you guys can do this. So let's do one or two more. So let's see here. Let's say I'm going to do 2 plus the quantity of 4x plus 3 quantity squared equals 18. Okay, so I'm going to have you guys solve that one. I'm going to give you guys, again, 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So it's 2 plus the quantity of 4x plus 3 squared, and then equals 18. So let's see what you guys get. All right. Let's take a look, guys. Hopefully, right, we're building that confidence, and then we're seeing what's going on. So the first thing I'm gonna look here is, right, my squared term is right here, so it's not alone. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I get the quantity of 4x plus 3 squared equals 18 minus 2 is 16. Okay. So then I'm going to take the square root of both sides because I isolated the squared term. So those are going to go away on the left side. So I'm going to end up with 4x plus 3 equals, and then I have plus or minus the square root of 16. Okay. Now, the square root of 16, right? So we have to think what number times itself gives me 16. Well, this is going to be 4. Right? 4 times 4 is 60. Okay. So now I'm going to have 2 equations. I'm going to have the positive one. So 4x plus 3 equals positive 4. And I'm going to have the negative one. So 4x plus 3 equals negative 4. So I'm going to solve both of these. So the first one I'm going to subtract. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. Okay. So I'm going to get 4x equals 4 minus 3 is 1. And then I'm going to divide by 4. So I get x equals 1/4. Right? So a quarter. And that's my first one. That's my positive, right? With 4 being positive. And then for my second one, I'm going to go through the same steps. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So I get 4x equals negative 4 minus 3. So we're getting more negative. So I'm going to be at negative 7. Okay. And then I'm going to divide 4 on both sides. And again, fractions are really nice because it's just a division that we don't want to do. So I have negative 7 divided by 4. Okay, so those are my 2 answers. I got negative 7/4 and 1/4. And that's it, guys. That's the end of class. So I will see you guys tomorrow, and we will practice this stuff some more. Bye, everybody.